I will call our meeting to order, this being the Tuesday, May 28th, 2019 meeting of the Addison Central School District Board. Let's do a quick round of introductions if we could. Would you mind leading us off, Victoria?
Sure. Victoria Jetty.
Chip Malcolm.
Amy Lagashi.
Mary Gill.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Peter Conlon.
Lorraine Morse.
Mary Colonnade.
Tori Jacobite. Jen Newceder.
Betty Kafumbe.
Vicki Wells, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services.
Thanks, everybody. This is the time in our agenda where we welcome public comment. Just a reminder, we have a fairly full agenda and a late start, so we will keep it to a certain amount of time. And that this is a time for us to listen and for you to speak. It's not a time for dialogue, it's not meant to be a public forum, but it's a chance for, again, you to speak and for us to listen. So I don't know if anybody is here with comments they'd like to make before we get started with our regular agenda.
I know.
Yes, please, Lori. And please give us your name and your community.
I'm Lori Cox. I'm from the town of Ripton. And this is, I call this an alternate proposal, and it just came to me today, and I couldn't send it electronically because the link seems like it's gone. So I'm bringing it here to you in paper and orally. So here's the proposal. The first thing is to either close down or tear down the part of Mary Hogan that's in the worst shape. I'm assuming it's the oldest part, but I don't know. A significant number of students, Middlebury students, would then continue at a somewhat smaller Mary Hogan, while the rest would be bused to outlying towns. This could be based on geography, or perhaps it could be a school choice for those families, since the busing would be coming from a centralized location. If it was deemed best, 6th grade could go to MUBS in that part of dispersal. The district would not be jettisoning any schools that are in decent shape, so money would be saved. The initial financial focus could then be on the high school and middle school needs. If and when population growth occurs, a new addition or building could be erected at the Mary Hogan site, and more or all of the Middlebury students could then attend in town. And if there's a smaller town where the building needs significant work and the town is in agreement to have it closed, that could be incorporated into this process. So, and if it hadn't just come to me today, I wouldn't have submitted it late. But.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, I'm Brittany Trudeau, and I really just heard about all of this a couple days
Tell me
ago.
from Brittany?
Town Shoreham.
Okay.
Yep, and I just found out about this a few days ago. And I mean, I've been in Shoreham my whole life. We've stayed in Shoreham so kids can go to the small community schools, and with it becoming, saying that there's, I think I looked at one of your guys' report that you had, that there's like $1 million worth of upgrade and upkeep with just one school. It's, why not bring it back simpler form instead of keep upgrading and newer things and having lunch programs, take it back to where parents have to send their kids with that. And I understand allergies, but that used to be taken care of when we were younger, where each class, if you had an allergy, you sent out a note, you just weren't allowed to pack it. So you could cut down costs by having additional things in each school. And I mean, we have smaller communities for a reason. It's a great thing. I know there's a few people that just moved to Shoreham and a few other towns because they wanted the smaller schools. So I mean, if there's something really, really bad with the school, like she was just talking about, if there's a bad part in Mary Hogan, it could either be torn down, or if we did fundraisers instead of it always being out of the taxpayers' money, stuff like that. Because when I was little, we used to do fundraisers for a lot of things, but nowadays I don't see that much. But that's something you could do, is if a school needed money for, like, say, windows or stuff like that. But there could be fundraisers that could help cut costs. I mean, and like I said, I just barely found out about this, so I only got to read a couple of the forms that you guys have up on your page. And I know I've talked to another parent that just went to Mary Hogan because his son's enrolling soon, but he didn't even know about this, that there was some schools on the chopping block. So, I mean, I didn't come prepared because I didn't have the time. So,
Thank you, Brittany.
My name's Amanda Gould. I'm kind of in the same boat as her. My husband and I, just had a kid go into kindergarten. We chose to go into Shoreham Elementary because it's a great school district, and I grew up in Salisbury. I wanted to kind of stay within the same community and have that same type of feel. It's frustrating as a contributing society member to all of a sudden just kind of find out from word of mouth of a coworker instead of being able to read it through a newsletter or something coming home, which I did read a very generic one, which did not in any tone to me say that any of the schools were going to be closing. So it's very frustrating as a taxpayer to see that.
Thank you, Amanda. Anybody else? Yes, hi.
Tanya Scuteri, Shoreham. I did go to the third of the 3 community discussions, and I thought it was a good, productive use of time. I think what some people are feeling is the flyer that got mailed out about the 3 meetings made no reference to schools possibly closing, and that we're analyzing these 4 different scenarios. So I think that would have been helpful in engaging the community a little bit more, and something to keep in mind for next time. And, excuse me, I lost my train of thought there. During that meeting, a lot of us had questions that it wasn't the appropriate time to get answered because it's not what we were there for on that particular night. So we put a bunch of things in the parking lot. And these are questions and sort of inquiries on additional data. And I'm wondering when those questions will be addressed and in what manner and how we'll get that feedback.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yes, Matt.
My name is Millard Cox. I'm from Ripton. And I just wanted to talk about the fact that when Lori and I first moved to Ripton in 1978, there was a one-room schoolhouse for the first 3 grades. And then 4 through 6 was bused down every day to Mary Hogan, which was, it was tenuous for us because we were told at a certain point during the 80s, when Mary Hogan was filling to capacity, that during the spring or summer of any of the next few years, we might be told that we could no longer send our 4 through 6 kids to Mary Hogan because it would be full. So at that point, we decided to build a school. And it wasn't a school that the whole district paid for. It was a school that Ripton paid for. We voted to build it. We approved the bond. And it was a 20-year bond, and we paid it off by ourselves without any help from the larger district. So now it's our school, and we want to keep it. That's why we built it, so that we would have a school in our town for our kids, and we wouldn't have to bus them down the mountain.
Yes.
Wendy Leeds, I'm from Ripton. I just wondered if, I know this is just, it's not a discussion, but can we get an answer to the question about the parking lot comments? Because that was something that I was wondering too. At what point do we ever get to sort of see what the distillation of that was? I know Bob is here and maybe that's happening tonight, but I don't know if we get to be a part of that or if we see a document that maybe reflects kind of the distillation of that and what some of those other comments and things that didn't, fall into the discussion
Right.
those nights.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll probably come up as we go through the comments and how they're organized. And hopefully we'll get an answer to you. If not tonight, then, yes, the parking lot comments and whatnot need to be categorized in some way, shape, or form for folks to have access to.
Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, we'll move along with our agenda. All right, we have draft minutes from May 13th meeting. Have a motion that we approve those?
Second.
Thank you. Anybody?
Abstain.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry. Moving us along.
Just keep it on file.
Anybody have any changes, corrections, comments, or anything? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of May 13th, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And anybody abstaining? We have one
Here it
abstention.
is.
I was trying to take notes. And then I can stop.
I can't get on the internet,
That's
so.
all right. I'll keep going.
Do we have a password? by any chance?
Go to the
We see-
ACSD website. Once you click on the internet link, then you go to the ACSD website and you log in with your ACSD account.
That work?
That's what we do.
Go to the ACSD website?
Yep.
Well, I'm not gonna call on you.
And enter the website?
Where are you going to Yep. Sign in with the ACSD Google account.
Yeah, my password here.
Can't help you there. That's what it's supposed to do. Not the regular sign up, but just at the bottom, like the ACSD Google.
Okay. We have approved the minutes. We will now move on to the bills.
It's two sets of bills since the last meeting. The first one on the 20th of May, read by Victoria and myself. It was a total of $233,828.69 under the general fund, and payroll expenses of $8,775.04 for a total of $321,533. That didn't add up, right? I don't know why the number at the bottom isn't. Yeah, this is what we sign off on. Anyway, there was a total of $321,533.73.
I think those numbers are reversed, 231.
231, yeah.
No.
No, that isn't the
Nope,
same.
that's not it either.
In any case,
Sorry.
I'll have to correct that. I didn't,
Please catch it.
we read them, but I didn't catch that number. The second were today's bills, 528, also read by Victoria and myself. There were two categories, one of which was McGilton Fund $4,300 payment regarding a field trip. And the second was the account, the general account of $75,952.94, and payroll expenses of $853,798.61 for a total of $929,751.55. I move we pay the bills. The bills were read, this number on the sheet, that there must be
I just added it, it's 241,
200.
because they do add up.
Yeah, okay. I don't know why this, I didn't add it up. 241. So for the bill from the 20th, the total will be 241,533.73. I'll give these to you, Lorraine, but yeah, sorry for the confusion. I move we pay the bill.
Sorry.
All right, moved and seconded that we pay the bill as read. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And we have paid the bills. All right, just a little change here. We're going to move the audit review, meal prices, and food service management company contract approvals just up under the report of the superintendent. So we can dispense with those relatively simply. Yeah. And so, yes.
So we're gonna welcome Brittany to the stage. to talk through these three items,
Okay.
and the bulk of this is the audit, which we just received. There's also a revised, and we've been continually revising this quarterly statement. Brittany will talk about the changes she's made in this third quarter statement. We're hoping to get to a statement that we can kind of finalize and that's relevant first, second, third, and final quarter, which can be a challenge with the way that schools budget. So we're kind of trying to find a perfect mean. Brittany.
Okay, so we'll start with the quarter 3 financial report summary. This is the same format that I presented for quarter 2. So as Peter said, we're trying to kind of give you a snapshot so that you can look at something high level and quickly to determine the health of the district financially. So I'm projecting that we'll end the year with about a $650,000 surplus. That sounds like a lot, but it's about 2% of our budget, which is normal and healthy. Private sector companies would, maybe hope for more like 5% or higher, but this is normal and healthy for school districts. We build in a small contingency, and then we have some surplus I'm expecting on top of that. A great deal of this is related to increased local revenues in the form of tuition, and also some savings in the areas of early retirements and some special education expenses that we anticipated that are not going to incur any longer.
And those have been typical each time you've reported?
They've been typical each time we've reported. You'll see, under student instruction, I'm projecting a small deficit now, and that's mostly because mostly all of our staff is included under student instruction. That's the bulk of our staffing, and this is related to the HRAs. So the HRAs actually reset on a calendar year, the health reimbursement accounts, so people get access again to their whole dollar amount in January. So I'm trying to be conservative in my projections of how much people will actually use, although I suspect that it'll be close to what was budgeted. The other notable variances are related to special education, which was the case last time. Some of this is related to positions we were not able to fill, and also some out-of-district placements that didn't come to fruition. Our district office administration is showing a deficit, and this is almost entirely related to unemployment. So we have a system in place now where we don't, some unemployment insurance we pay a flat rate for other districts, but we just pay as incurred. So sometimes we have more unemployment claims than others, and most frequently they're related to individuals who maybe are a coach or a substitute with us and are applying for unemployment because they've lost their primary job, but because they've received wages from us, we still have to contribute. So that's the deficit related to district office administration. It's not related to hiring more staff or anything like that. If you look at, there's a chart for total expenditures, and we've spent about 75%. So we're 3/4 of the way through the year. That's right where we should be. I don't think I could have made it more perfect if I wanted to. If you look at the fund balance report, prior to unification, we carried much larger fund balances. Now we're carrying a lower fund balance, and this is largely related to a lot of careful attention to budgeting and really looking at what is needed and trying to align more closely with what we're asking from the taxpayer. So last year, going into this year, we had a small fund balance, only $123,000, which is lower than I'm comfortable with. The fund balance that I'm expecting us to end with this year is about where I'd like to see us year over year. Are there any questions about that?
You can't really budget for a fund balance, though.
No. So we have a contingency that we budget for, and I'd like to see us not use the contingency. And then, the remainder of that would be savings, things that we budgeted for that we're budgeting for conservatively, but we're not having to expend up to our budget every year for all things. Some years we'll have to, and in some years we won't. And the years that we don't have to is how we pay for the years that we need to overspend by placing this money in reserves. It's how we funded, some capital projects in the past, or capital reserve fund. So.
There is a lot of variation in a lot of these lines too, and we did make significant changes from last year to this year, and we're seeing right now at least projected about a $500,000 difference. next year that could swing in another direction too. So there is a bit of movement. And because we're in a unified budget now, the numbers are changing. So what we used to talk about, for example, those that were on the UD3 board, we're dealing with a much smaller budget. So the 600,000 on 38 million is a much different proposition. Typically with UD3, we ran fund balances of around $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. So we have pared down, and this happened 2 years ago, we really pared down those line items to try to get closer to what we actually spent. And we continue to do that every year when we kind of go back and look at actuals and look forward.
I think the format of that is spot on. It's very user-friendly, easy to understand.
Thank you for the feedback. Any other questions about that before I move on to the very exciting 141 page audit? I'm not gonna read you all 141 pages. Don't worry. I'm gonna tell you where you can find things. So I'm gonna give you some page numbers. So if you want to write things down or type where to find things, I'm just gonna tell you where you can locate some things if you want to look, and then I'll give you the highlights. So I'll give you a second to open it up and get your pens out to write furiously.
Do you want to just give a really short overview of the audit timeline?
Yeah, so the audit actually starts before the fiscal year even ends. So our auditors come usually in May or June, and they do what's called a pre-audit. So they pull a sample of our expenditures, our invoices. They look at our payroll, some of our contracts. They just look at a little bit of everything, and they do some testing. And this helps inform some of the things that they're going to ask for when they come in the fall. So last year they came in October. This coming year they'll come in September. And they come for about a week. They're on site for about a week. And myself and my staff are basically solely dedicated to them during this time. So we meet with them. They ask questions about our processes, our procedures, our internal controls. They take our policies and procedures and they test against them. So they make sure we're following our policies and procedures. They also always test a major federal program. So for us, our major federal programs are consolidated federal programs, which is Title I, Title IIA, that program, our IDEA-B, which is special education federal grant, and our child nutrition program is actually considered a federal grant. And they have to be a certain threshold, be a certain percentage of our overall budget. And they test those more closely. They also look at our internal controls to make sure that, for example, we have separation of duties, so we don't have the same person approving and signing checks. Those are the type of things that they look for during the audit. And then they spend the next couple of months compiling financial statements. Sometimes they come back to us and ask us for more. And then by March 31st, they have to have our audit submitted to us, and we have to submit our audit to the federal clearinghouse, which gives us access to federal funds. If we don't have our audit submitted by March 31st, then we can't draw on federal funds until it is submitted. And the reason for that is because the federal government wants to make sure that we're managing our funds appropriately. And at the end, we get this. For you, it's in electronic format. So the first important thing is on page 2. This is the Independent Auditors Report. And it describes the scope and procedures of the audit, and it gives some information about what the report contains. It also gives an opinion, and the opinion is that the financial statements are presented fairly and in all material aspects represent our financial position. Next, on page 5 is the Management Discussion and Analysis. This is about 10 pages, and there's a note that says unaudited because this comes from me. So it's an overview of, it's a summary of what's included in the audit. So this is a really good thing to read. If you don't have time or a desire to read 141 pages about our net pension liability and would like to just get a sense of what's in the audit, one of the challenges of the audit is that it presents financial statements in a way that we're not used to looking at them in school districts, and in a way that isn't necessarily useful to us on a day-to-day basis. But it is good information to have. It's important for me to know, and it's good for you to understand how they're compiled. So they're presented in a similar fashion that you would see in the private sector. So they're looking at our capital assets, they're looking at our depreciation expense, which isn't really something that we look at with the same level of detail. So this gives you some information about that. The financial statements actually start on page 13, You'll see the statement of net position, the balance sheet, cash flows. Those are the type of reports that you'll see. And there are different kinds of funds, different kinds of activities, and some of that's described in the management discussion and analysis. And the financial statements last for about 13 pages before you get to page 26, which gives you notes about the financial statements. A huge portion of our notes is dedicated to pension liability, as are all school districts in Vermont. So they spend a great deal of time describing actuarial values and when the pension liability goes up and down based on what ages, based on the federal state teachers retirement system. And so a lot of the notes are related to that, and this is not unique to us. This is the case for all school districts. And it's because we don't really book that liability on our books, but it's something that they still have to provide information about. Something that you might be interested in is our debt schedules, which we do present in our budget book, but this gives you some information about our capital assets as well as our short and long-term debt on page 43. And this kind of gives you an overview of what our debt's going to look like in the coming years, when we're going to see a drop in our debt. Our debt's about 1% of our overall budget, which is reasonable. Our debt payments, our annual debt service. And then on page 75 is what we call RSI, which is required supplementary information. And this looks a little bit more familiar. So it's a budget to actual in some different ways. And you can see our fund balance, you can see what we've committed to spending for fund balance, what we spent last year in fund balance. And it groups things similarly to how I would group them in this financial report.
What page did you say that was?
That's on 76. It gets a little more detailed on page 83. And then we're almost to the end. So there's a report on internal controls, which is on page 136. And per the auditors, they didn't find any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And that's as good as you can get. You don't get any higher praise. No parades, no cookies, just nothing bad.
You didn't screw up.
Yeah, right. Pat on the back. So they didn't find any areas that needed to be corrected for internal controls. Then on page 138 is the audit of our federal program, which was Title I this year. And their opinion on the federal program is that we complied in all material aspects with the requirements of the grant. And then, last but not least, page 141, summary. Very handy. And so they say they didn't identify any material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, no non-compliance that's material to the financial statements, and no findings and no question costs. So their opinion is unmodified, which sounds bad, but it's actually the best you can get. So it means we didn't have to make any modifications to be materially correct.
Could you just clarify the difference between this particular audit and the one that you talked about at the last meeting for the report?
So this audit is something that we have to get every year, and they audit the prior year. So we're actually looking at FY18, even though we're almost done with FY19. The federal fiscal monitoring that we recently participated in is related solely to federal grants. It looks at all our federal grants. It looks at them with much more granular detail, and it's an audit of the current year. So they look at what we're doing currently.
And how often is that one?
It's on like a 3 to 4 year cycle. They can come more often if they have concerns, but typically it's about once every 4 years or so.
But that's the one you said we were in the top 3 schools in the state.
Yeah.
Correct.
All 3 districts.
Make sure that gets in the record because I think
All
that's.
right, so the other difference is that the federal one, we don't pay for, but this one we pay for.
That's correct. Yeah.
What does it cost to do this audit on it?
Oh, it's about $40,000.
It is, and we do it every year.
They do it every year, and
We go out to bid?
we did go out to bid. This was our second or third year with R.H.R. Smith, and they are like far and away the cheapest.
Yeah.
And also do a great job. So sometimes you don't get quality for low cost, but in this case we are. I've been very happy with them, and a lot of school districts in Vermont have moved to them. Their firm is out of Maine, but they have local auditors that work out of the home. One of our audit managers was a former business manager at Champlain Valley School District. Your former business manager is not our auditor, but works for this firm. He's not allowed to audit us. he works there too, so they have some talent.
Any other questions?
I did not order everybody bound copies, but if you're disappointed, I can.
Only if they're autographed.
Yeah.
First edition.
So the last two things?
Yeah.
Okay, these will be a little bit quicker. So the first one is FY20 meal prices. We have to set our meal prices for the coming year. A lot of this is based on a formula. So we have to put in some financial information into what's called the paid lunch equity tool, and it gives us a target price. And the reason for the target price is that the federal government doesn't want our reimbursement that we get for free and reduced lunches to subsidize what our paid students are actually paying. So they give us a target price, and we have to work up to that target price. So for the coming year, the target price for lunch is $3, and one school was actually already at $3, and the rest of the schools were at $2.90. So we're proposing that all the schools have a $3 paid lunch price. Free and reduced doesn't change. Free is always free, and reduced is also free because the state picks up the difference. So this would be for paid lunches for students. And then the rest of the prices are, breakfast is partially based on requirements and just partially based on what we need to break even. So we're also moving toward equity. So we're moving toward one price for all, but we don't want to make a huge jump in any one year. We don't want to increase anybody by 50 cents. So that's why you're still seeing some disparities. You can see the history here. But we're proposing $3 for student lunch. We're basically keeping adult lunch the same, except we're proposing moving the 3 Middlebury schools, which are on a food service management contract, to be the same price, which is $4. Breakfast, we're trying to get up to the $2 mark, which is closer to where we can break even, and then we're leaving milk at 50 cents. Milk comes with the meal, but if you purchase it separately, you have to pay 50 cents. Questions?
Any questions on that? Can I have a motion then to approve the FY20 meal prices as proposed?
Second.
All right, any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? All right, so we have set meal prices.
And the last thing that I have is to renew our food service management company contract for the coming year. So every year we have to renew. We can renew it up to 4 times. Just the 3 Middlebury schools have a management company. The remainder of the schools run an in-house program. And this would be our last year renewing with the Abbey Group. The terms of the contract are unchanged. So they guarantee a $15,000 profit for MUMS and MUHS, and guarantee that we'll have to subsidize no more than $12,262 at Mary Hogan. And this will, as I said, this will be the last year, so for the 2021 school year, we'll have to go out to bid. And that will start, I'll probably have to start developing the bid in the winter, and we'll hopefully be collecting bids and bringing them to you to analyze in the spring. It's a pretty big lift and a pretty big bid, and it takes a long time. So I'm proposing that we just finish out our contract with the Abbey Group for the 3 Middlebury schools.
Okay, and this is the final year, then when it goes back out to bid, is it right that, that they've guaranteed us a $15,000 return on the MUMS MUHS bid, but they've actually taken a loss at these schools, or have they been able to correct that?
I don't think that they're taking a loss at the high school and the middle school.
Okay.
I think they're 2 years ago,
Right.
I think they did have a lower than projected revenue.
Yeah.
I don't know if they took a significant loss. I know they did make some changes to their program and instituted the pasta bar, the taco Tuesdays, and some other stuff. And so I think they rebounded from that. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, and
in a
the
while.
format of the new bid will also be different. So what we have is a price fixed contract, and what a lot of schools have is a price fixed contract. For our next contract, it will not be like that, unfortunately. It'll be a fixed price per meal, basically, that we'll have to pay. And that is a recent change. I think this is the first year that contracts are mandated to be like that. So it remains to be seen what that will look like for us, what that will mean. We'll have to do some analysis when that time comes. And
Why does Mary Hogan need a subsidy? Are they not making,
they're
just not breaking even like the middle school and high school?
They may not be profitable. So when they did the bid, Mary Hogan was not profitable. And so they guarantee that we won't have to subsidize any more than $12,262. We may not have to subsidize that much, depending on how they do. I think this past year, we didn't have to quite do the full amount, but we did have to subsidize some.
And are we subsidizing because we're not selling enough full price meals?
Yeah, yeah.
There was also a provision, I'd have to double check to see where it's at now, but there was a provision years ago where Mary Hogan put in $10,000. That was when for local foods. I don't know if that got transferred over into Abby when Abby took over from Cafe Services.
We don't do anything separate than the.
Remember we had 5,000
Yeah,
for.
I don't know, 5,000.
Or
Okay.
beef or something? Local beef.
Yeah.
We
Anyway, I
also
just wanted
participate in
to-
the fresh fruits and vegetable program at some of the schools, which provides additional grant money for local foods, which is it's a net zero, but part of our contract.
Lorraine?
At one point, there was a lot of interest in going in-house for the places that we're currently using
Mhm.
Is there still discussion about that? Are we looking into that anymore, or?
It's still, I think it's still to be addressed, that it's something that, as we look at all the different things on our plate, we've decided to put that process off, to decide whether we need to go all or keep it, Middlebury having food service providers and having it local in the other towns. So we haven't tackled that yet. We definitely identified it as something that we need to look at further, but just looking at capacity in terms of what we can do and change, we've kind of felt like that's kind of working right now as it is.
Yeah, and I know we've had a lot of other things going on, so I just didn't know if it was something
we
that
kind
was
of
still even
have
being.
been waiting on that, but I think it's something that we will want to tackle in the next couple of years, for sure. And there are strong feelings on both sides. There are people that feel really strongly about, in-house food that you can manage more directly. That comes with a price tag. And then there are folks that say we should try to be cost neutral, who prefer, I think, a food service provider. It's less overhead, less administration. Generally, if you go in-house, you have to hire a director. And we went through that process in talking to Mount Abe, and you were part of that process maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So definitely something that, as we look again, we'll look anew at, but.
The Finance Committee asked some of those questions when this came up, just tonight, and Business Manager definitely pointed out there's many different positives and negatives, but there's a tremendous overhead, obviously, to the detail that you have to keep and record, and all of the federal and all the other things which go into it. So it is not it's not very simple.
Oh, no, I know.
And none of us know that, but yet even those that know it, it's not a simple process just in a general way. It requires a tremendous amount of overhead, and some of the food service people, especially in the schools that are doing it on their own, they're not the highest paid people in the districts for sure, and that puts a lot of work onto them, and if it's the right person, fine. Otherwise, they get a different position and they leave. And then that puts the onus on us to have to find that person.
Well, and I think we're doing a better job, I think, than we have in the past in terms of support, and Brittany and her team have taken it, I think, a step further in terms of supporting our schools that have in-house.
I'm not saying we're not doing it well, but I'm just...
No, but what I was going to say is I was going to agree with you that I think looking ahead long-term, we need to provide more support than we currently are. I'd like to provide more support, and that would require more staffing than we currently have. So we're reticent to take that a step further without like a real process to look at pros, cons, and have people weigh in.
So I have one more question then. Are the smaller schools that have their own local food service, are they breaking even,
No,
or are they,
no.
there's a loss there too?
There's a loss. We subsidize from the general fund. Next year, I'm projecting about $75,000 combined for the 6 schools.
One of our bigger issues has been staff retention.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
So we had 5 of 6 positions open this year.
That's why my comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is really disturbing because you hire somebody who learns the whole process.
Right.
Yes.
Does Abby even do schools as small as?
They do.
So they do, okay.
They do,
so-
it's just, you have to see how profitable it would be. But they do, they will bid on it, but so far we have not gone that route. You
All
also
right.
can't just add, sorry to interrupt, you can't just add a school without going back out to bid.
All right, sure, no.
Yeah, so if we lost a food service manager like we did this year and had trouble finding one, we weren't able to just say, Abby, can you just come in and do it in the interim? We can't do that. We would have had to go back out to bid for the whole district, so cumbersome.
Okay.
I have 2 questions. Does that price include breakfast or is it just lunch?
No, the price of the,
$3, that's lunch.
oh, the $3 is just lunch.
So, but breakfast is part of the meal.
Breakfast is part of the program and is part of the cost, the $15,000 and the $12,000. I'm not sure if we're looking at or talking about the same thing.
Separate price for each meal.
Yes.
$3 for lunch, and they're trying to get breakfast up to $2.
But the cost of the contract our contract with Abbey Group is inclusive of all this. I don't think that I got a motion to.
Yeah. I'm about to ask for, yeah. Betty, you said you had 2 questions?
Well, yeah, the other one was, I was just wondering how many, like if breakfast is really necessary. Like, do we need
have to
breakfast?
provide breakfast.
We have to? Okay.
Okay, then a motion to renew the food service management contract between the Addison Central School District and the Abbey Group for the 1920 school year.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of renewing the food service management contract, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining?
Thank you.
We don't
Thank you for
fee-
listening to me for that long.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.
You're very concise.
Yeah.
All right, so getting our agenda back on track, we're going to continue our conversation about the facilities master plan. And of course, I also just wanted to point out to you that within the budget packet, there was the grade configuration inquiry report, final report from 2017. Definitely worth rereading, which I did today as well. And you know, as we sort of continue this process and we start looking towards summer, here, you know, we're sort of needing the point where we need to set our decision points as we go along. Bob's going to help us through the conversation to get kind of focused on that, you know, 6th grade being one decision point, and then of course all the others that go along with the master plan. Bob, are you set to?
Anytime
Great,
you'd like
go
me
right
to
ahead.
begin. Okay, I could hand out this sheet of paper to board members. Take one because it's going to guide the conversation. I have some extra copies for the audience back here. Peter asked me to come tonight to give you a glimpse into the plan journey going forward, to set context. You as a group have spent about 2 years on this process. You've engaged the community twice, and concluding the second engagement in the community in April of this year. You have that input in hand, we hope. I'll make sure tomorrow morning that you do. The 3 bodies of information coming out of the April meetings are first, all of the output from the 3 nightly meetings in the form of Post-it notes that then were put on a variety of documents. Sharon has spent a lot of hours the last 3 or 4 weeks pulling that together in a document you can read. I will make sure tomorrow morning you have access to the document if you haven't already gained access, because there was some question on whether board members had seen that. The second one is the committee put together a grand challenge email vehicle where people could write in subsequent letters to the meetings or emails in lieu of attending the meetings, giving their input or perspective on things the board was talking about. That document is rather lengthy. I will make sure again that you have access to the document. Some of you have been copied on a number of those emails. Whoever authored an email and sent it to Grand Challenge also copied all board members, but you did not necessarily get them all. So what Sharon sends you tomorrow will be a complete anthology of all of those. And then lastly, the steering committee put together a technique of gaining student survey input. That data has been collected in a Google survey and is also available for you to peruse. Again, I'll make sure tomorrow morning that we have that loop closed in case you haven't seen it. I will caution you, those documents are rather lengthy. They will consume a bit of your time to get from the beginning to the end of those documents, but in fairness to the process, I would ask you in the next few weeks to make sure you do go cover to cover, because whoever in the community gave you input is confident and expecting that you will look at it all. The steering committee spent this afternoon trying to develop a way to distill some of that into important themes or conclusions or thoughts that the board should have foremost in their mind as they enter into the next stage of the process. The steering committee doesn't have that done yet, but when they finish that, we'll pass that on to you as well. So that's kind of the work behind you and work ongoing with the input. Is there any questions relative to those items? Yes, Mary.
So you say you're going to send it to us by email, or is it going to be a full package, or how will we? I want to make sure I know exactly what I'm getting.
I am going to send you the same 3 links that the steering committee has in their hands that allow you to go look at those 3 documents in the form that I described.
So it'll be all
to
in
you.
one place?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I can send it right now, is that just easier?
Yeah, if you would like to do that, please do that. I was going to do it tonight before tomorrow morning to make sure I meet the deadline.
Check it off the list.
Okay, I'll take it off my list. Thank you. So that's the work before you. The key item we'd like to do tonight is have you all gain familiarity on what the next 4 or 5 weeks or 3 months look like relative to this process. You as a board have an obligation on your schedule to complete a facilities master plan with recommendations that are endorsed by the board in the September timeframe. It is our belief or recommendation that you as a board lay in a schedule that allows you to have it done the early part of the September, so there's some window of time between when the report is available and when you will actually vote and approve it. Targeting to have it approved by the board in late September. So you okay with that process? There are a number of individuals working in the background right now to pull together all of the work you've done behind you into the front 2/3 of that document. So everything we've been discussing, you've been sharing, you've been working on the last 2 years will be in the first 10 or 15 pages of that document. What's key is that you spend the next 3 months working on the last 4 pages or last 5 pages or whatever it is. That in essence says, based on all this, this is what we believe we should be doing going forward. The first step in that process is outlined on that sheet of paper I just handed you. It says, given the work, all the work you have done, what structure should the recommendations take? Think here, the recommendations section is what you're working on. What are the items that go into that? What are the paragraphs? What are the sections that should be called out? As you reflect back on all the work you've done for 2 years, what should the board make sure they've addressed as part of publishing this document? Once you have that list, you should put a framework around those items that says, this is the board's belief on what we know we should do today. This is the board's belief on the information we need to make a decision at some point in the future. So when the community reads this, they have a clear handle on what you're going to be doing for the next 3 months, 6 months, 3 years relative to facilities in the school. I'll pause there. Does that all, do you understand the landscape of the recommendations? So what I'd like to do now is, well, let me continue with the next few items here. You had an interesting conversation at an earlier board meeting on how this dialogue is taking kind of a 3-step process from a discussion to a setting direction to a decision. Do you remember that conversation that the board had? No, not really? I heard it on TV, so it has to be true. But anyway, what I wanted to emphasize that is because many of these items, some you will be ready to be making a decision with clarity in another month. Some need a whole lot of information gathered for you to make a decision, but you're committed to make a decision in that arena. And then some of your decisions may occur 6 months, 9 months out from now after you've worked one of these items for a period of time. We need to be clear in what we write into that master plan on what journey you're on, so people in the community clearly understand when it is they're going to hear you make a decision relative to this topic. So let's do 2 examples to give you an idea how this all works. Just for example, say you felt, based on what you've done already, that you need to move on 6th grade consolidation. You either need to move forward or drop it from the list of considerations, and that's the earliest thing you want to be working on here in the next 4 or 5 months. In this plan document, you would in essence say that, and you would outline in the document what it is you need as a board to make that final decision, and when that final decision might be occurring, and then when it would be implemented. It would be great to have all that detail in the plan. So are we good on that one? You understand how that works? You've got another one that's a bit more complicated. You've talked at great length about capacity, utilization of schools, particularly at the elementary level. You're probably going to take a little longer than the next 2 meetings to gather information you feel necessary to make the right decision, but in this document, we want to lay that out as to when that's going to occur and what information you need so that someone around this table or here is working that information for you. So those 2 are kind of at ends of the spectrum. What we're going to ask you to do is lay out all the items, these 2 examples, what other 10 items, and what's the timeline with which they're all going to be worked. Any questions?
Nope.
Clear? So the work tonight, what I'd like to do is if you want to fire off items you think need to be part of that conversation, I can jot them down so that when we meet again in late June, we can begin to put the details around each of those. So as you reflect back on the last 2 years, what do you feel should be in the conversation relative to recommendations you're making to the community?
I'm happy to jot so you can lead the
Okay.
conversation if you like.
You're very, very helpful. Thanks, Jen.
So obviously the one you brought up in the example, being 6th grade, is a decision that we need to make and lay out what further we need for that.
Okay, good.
I also have, just was jotting some stuff down, if and when we decide to float a bond, when that will occur. Obviously, the one we've been talking about a lot is, which of our options, if any, are we going to go with, and what more do we need to know to even decide which one that might be.
And that's not even, that's just, that's without specific proposals within any of those options. So
Right.
there's still a whole nother thread
right.
of information gathering and questions and discussion within any one of those options, right? Because we
That's
can
right.
imagine different scenarios.
Yes, and so, I think we could imagine, this summer as part of the master plan saying, we feel that we can readjust our footprint, but we are in no position to make a decision on how to do that without doing a lot more in-depth study and then saying, okay, we want to engage somebody with the skill level, architect, engineer, whatever it might be, to do that study for us during, whatever time frame, whatever year time frame probably.
But isn't that's more of a direction in your discussion? Discussions are obviously occurring all the way along through it, but direction is different than decision. you know, which is what you're saying. A direction would be, there's some
That's right.
variation on any of those themes that we have discussed. And we will be directing, moving in that direction, rather than saying, we're not going to do any of this, and we're just going to stay at the status quo, which obviously, we've said already, is not feasible.
Yeah. Well, and you would lay out a decision point with it, though, you'd say.
Yeah, you have
We'll
a
spend
decision
1 year,
endpoint.
1 year of study
Right.
with a decision point.
Chip, that's a good distinction between the set direction and the make a decision.
Yeah.
And we do that, you do that with clarity to the community, and they'll begin to understand. You know, a number of people showed up at various meetings all the way back in November, wanted to know the decision.
Right.
You'll be clear with them, kind of, and a map when that's gonna occur.
And obviously, the public, some who are here and others who are not here may have a different opinion, have a very set idea of what the decision should be. We don't at this point, okay?
Right.
But the direction is something that, you know, is important, we have some timeline on.
Good.
I'm not sure if this is, I suppose it is it's part and parcel of a facilities master plan, even though it's not specifically about buildings or capacity, but it's really a policy. And that is, you know, it's certainly going to discuss school choice, and if that fits in, and I think what kind of goes along with that is, you know, what is a border?
Right.
What is a catchment area of a school?
Right. And that's a huge part of this.
I think I've heard from the group that equity needs to be there somehow, that you need to be talking about what that means for the board.
Yep.
Because that was one of your guidelines that we started this whole process with.
But you also, in order, again, to define that, which everybody struggles with, and your fence analogy with the stools and whatever, the boxes to stand on is, I think, reasonable, but in actual fact, the equity, you've got to gather a lot of data to be able to prove, okay, that in fact there is not equity presently. And, okay,
Yep.
I mean, I think most of us empirically know that in a general way, just by distance, size, all the other things which can relate to that, but you know, we don't have necessarily fixed data in front of us that says that these two schools don't have access to this as much as these two schools, or whatever that type of thing is. So
Yep.
that comes under the data collection in a more specific way.
So maybe, I mean, in terms of items to be decided upon, that's probably the very first thing, was deciding upon our agreed upon definition of equity.
Or perhaps to bring it down to a less abstract level, more like, what do we think every school should provide?
Right.
Yeah.
Or what should every child have access to? That could be as specific as a dedicated art room, or it might be as vague as an art program.
Yeah.
Is there any room in the discussion for looking at different educational themes or opportunities in terms of, I know we're in the IB program, and I don't know, do we have to, are individual schools going to be able to provide different opportunities within the IB curriculum? So for instance, if one school wants to be sort of more in the creative arts theme, is that going to be a possibility, or are all the elementary schools going to be following sort of the same track and themes?
I mean,
Is there
I
flexibility?
think there's a unique character to each school and how it manifests the curriculum. But I don't think if you're talking about a magnet school, that would be a totally different curriculum.
Right. Okay.
Which would be probably self-determined and more of a kind of a silo, which wouldn't match. where
Which
we
wouldn't
are.
fit in with the IB.
Right.
That's
right,
what I wanted to
right.
know.
And it would be hard for us to, supporting that and then supporting
Okay.
everything else would be.
So there's going to be some kind of clear guidelines within each school of following the IB curriculum.
Yeah.
And not going off on a different tangent. Or a different theme, what I'm saying, you know.
I don't think there's any road principles out there right now.
No, I don't.
It's a good
You're gonna start a Chinese
It's a good question.
I mean, to me, one of the benefits of IB is that it's not cookie cutter. It's a framework, but there's a lot of fluidity within the framework, and it's very constructivist, which allows for the manifestation of lots of different kinds of creativity. So I think that's one of the benefits of it. And having visited lots of different IB schools, they're not all the same
Okay.
at all.
So within our district, we could still
Yeah.
look at that, okay.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing, Bob, it seems logical to me, is that what we're trying to do is sort of come up with these, however many number of items, and then coming up with a logical sequence, or a sequence that's clear as to how we're going to go about it, where the decision points lie along the way, and in order to, make that clear to not just ourselves, but to the larger community.
Yeah, if I could restate your action items coming from the conclusion tonight. Jen and I will get the list of items you've identified so far out to you. The first thing you need to do is make sure the list is comprehensive, that we're helping you chase the right things, that you aren't going to come to the table in September wishing we had took a voyage in some other area. And then we're going to ask you to put meat on those items. The first way would be, what information do you need as a board to make that decision? What additional work needs to be undertaken by architects or engineers, or by the school administration to get to the point where you can make a decision that's specific to that item? And then you'll begin to see how the items kind of sort out. Some are going to need 3 or 4 months worth of work to really get to the quality of decision you want to do. And so then we'll do the timeline to your point. But the first two would be, make sure the list is as lengthy as it needs to be and comprehensive. And again, that question, what information do you need from others to say yay or nay as far as a commitment in a direction?
So with that in mind, I'd like to just sort of continue the discussion about if there's more things that we should be keeping on this list. Yes, Victoria?
Yeah, I would say that pre-K is obviously going to be a big, both from a facilities and a programmatic standpoint.
We had transportation study along with architectural engineering.
Under a specific category, or under an
I guess
already
along with assessing.
Under the elementary school options?
I'd say it'd be under the boundaries and school choice.
Sure. School choice, borders, we're saying transportation under there? Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
The transportation, we also sort of chatted with this in finance too, relative to how do we audit or come up with a transportation plan unless you have a goal. Meaning,
You have to
sites.
you have to model it.
You have to
basically.
model it first. So
Right.
transportation really only comes about once you have a direction that you're going to go to certain options, I would say.
Well, we do have a transportation study that's a couple months late, maybe, would you say?
It's not me.
No, I'm not.
You pointed at me though, like it was, I just want to
I
be
wasn't
clear.
You're the
meaning-
one placing the
Yeah.
daily calls.
I was sharing the pain, that's what I was
It's-
trying to
yeah.
do.
Well, our transportation company has done a transportation study for us. There may be efficiencies. We haven't reviewed it yet. We did find one efficiency this year. We were able to eliminate one route without eliminating any service because it was a duplicative route. So we're still looking at that. So there may be efficiencies we can gain.
Yeah, I mean,
in the
I was
short
just-
term.
I was just raising that, we are looking at just currently with where we came from.
Right.
Our bus routes were created with 8 school
Boundaries.
districts. And so now thinking differently as one school district, we're thinking that we may be able to save a little bit, thinking across town boundaries.
But the transportation bullet that you're
Right.
writing down is not that, okay? I
Right.
don't think. That has to come about in a different way, and probably not from the vendor, okay? It probably has to come from some other engineering, transportation consultant, I would expect, to be able to tell us how that would work.
Right. So
'Cause
we
I
have
would-
that.
I would think that the vendor they're gonna be at cross purposes. I mean, if they cut too many routes out, it's not to their advantage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we had a similar conversation in our committee meeting, because, to define sort of, 'cause
Right.
we know this is happening, so that could be useful, but may or may not be included in our plan, but a more in-depth transportation
Right.
study will likely be needed, specifically around if there is a direction that we're heading. So if it's okay with everybody, knowing that that transportation study is coming, just a general one, it seems like if there's more transportation studies needed, it would need to go with the elementary options. Does that make sense?
I think that was.
Okay.
That's my point.
That's where I put it.
Go ahead.
I think we need a statement with regards to just our overall environmental strategy, energy efficiencies as a heading,
Carbon footprint.
carbon footprint,
Yeah.
what our goals are, et cetera.
Am I making an assumption, or do we need to make an explicit if not, that there's interface with the Planning and Engagement Committee throughout, so that when we are at discussion, that at what point we're being more intentional in reporting out to our community or getting community input or whatever?
Probably haven't crossed that bridge yet, or?
We've touched that subject at every meeting we've had in the last 3 months, so it isn't lost. But the focus for the next 2 or 3 weeks will be work of the board. And then, yes, before all you do high fives and say you've got things started, we do need to talk about how you're turning around and sharing it with the community and what that looks like.
Yep.
Okay? So it's not ignored, but it's...
Yep.
I might add, that goes along with the, are we going to do a bond, is also what's our priority? Do we want to focus our money on the high school and its needs and try to solve our capacity issues at the lower grade levels with the money that we have, or where's our priority there?
These are all easy.
Yeah. A couple of meetings, we'll have it all figured out. Yes, Betty.
Like special needs services for services for special needs, service providers.
Yeah. Factor that in as a topic.
Is that just in general, or is that relating to like the equity, where it's different with some of our schools? What are you thinking?
Probably under equity, or what different children might have access to, or I'm not sure where it would fall, but also under school choice.
Yep. That's kind of an underlying, that kind of underlies a lot of stuff.
Topic? You think its own topic? Okay.
Well, don't we have sort of something like that in the district now, where certain children get better services at other schools?
Hope not.
Well, no, but I meant very special situations.
We have out-of-district placements.
Okay, well,
There's a variety of FTE available at different schools because of the population and need. So not every school has access to like a full-time special educator or a full-time speech language pathologist or other services.
but how do we provide a special needs child in a school that has limited services?
We staff according to need.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you,
see you
Bob.
again in short order.
I'm going to, anything further on that that you'd like to bring up?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. We have an executive session scheduled. I think we'll do that before we engage in a conversation about summertime meeting dates, if that's okay with everybody. I'm sure the television audience won't mind missing us out, missing out on us having that. Anything else to bring up before we have an executive session? It'll be brief. Hearing nothing, how about a motion to go into executive? Well, let me just stop there before we take all that. What do you think? I think it's probably a good time for an update on where things stand, if that's with our current negotiations with the ESP, or might that be better? I'm just thinking about where we left off at our last session, and maybe this is better off coming under our next meeting, so we may not need to break for an executive session.
Yeah, I mean, you could fill them in on where we are heading into the next meeting, or wait.
Yeah.
You've got your trustee vice chair here too.
I
Yeah.
I wondered why we were having one.
Yeah, all right, well, we'll wait. So I will just say, in public session, we continue to be in negotiations with the support staff. As we've reported in the past, it's a complicated one in that everybody is coming from different places. You know, the teachers were on a path to a unified contract before we even became a unified district. You know, support staff was all over the place. And so as we try to bring that all together and try to create a salary schedule and try to create sort of pay equity among everybody, it's a complicated process. But we've actually made some very significant steps forward. And hopefully at our next meeting, we'll be able to bring kind of the framework of an agreement. I think we're headed down that way. Yeah. All right. Good. Well, then we will move on to summer meeting times and what dates work, because I know it gets complicated at this point. June even gets complicated for me. So again, you know, we're on a 2nd and 4th schedule. And obviously not everybody's going to make every meeting. So our next meeting would be on June 10th. And then the 24th.
Are you gone on the 24th?
I am gone on the 10th. And hopefully back in time for the 24th, but I have to confirm that. I happen to be taking a vacation from the 11th to the 23rd or 24th. So I could be completely jet lagged and really kind of.
Are you sure the session will be over?
Yeah, we're done. We're done. You know, I think the 3rd probably would be more of a general business meeting.
What are we talking about?
I'm sorry. I'm back to the 1st and 3rd Mondays, the 10th.
Gotcha.
So the question is, you know, these need to be productive work sessions on the topics we just discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And so as many hands on deck as possible.
I won't be here on the 24th.
So do you want to take a poll of who's not here on those certain days?
So let's, if we're using our current schedule, how many would be gone on the 10th? It's 2, and plus we have some missing.
Yes.
How many gone on the 24th? Okay, just the 24th? Or like if we made it the 25th? Does that make a difference?
Nope.
No.
Okay.
Like when you're back.
You're like back August 28th.
Yeah, right.
I'm
yeah.
just going for,
Yeah, don't go too far, because I'm going to Florida pretty soon after that.
I'm supposed to go to Florida in the summer.
Why not? That's when the kids are out of school.
All right, well, let's talk about July.
So we haven't decided anything on June.
Right.
No, we're gonna, you know,
We're still taking
only
polls.
2 hands for each one, and I
All
think
right,
that's not
okay.
bad.
All right, go ahead.
I think we keep June's. Fine.
Keep June's dates.
Wait, but didn't you want to push the 24th a little further? Because that's when you're back? Is that what you're supposed
You know, if we could, I'd love to push the 24th to the 25th.
Let's. I think that sounds lovely.
If it makes it more likely that you're going to be there.
Right.
Okay. It
And we're
would
going to Massachusetts that weekend, so I might.
take it 3
Come
days.
back.
25th, actually, yeah, that would work better.
All right, so we're gonna do the 10th and the 25th for June.
Love it. Do we need to tell Sharon this?
I'm telling her
You'll
right
tell
now.
Sharon? Fabulous.
And make sure the people who are not.
The
here
second-
Keep her up the schedule.
The second Monday in July is actually the 8th.
Yep.
Who won't be here on the 8th?
We haven't
Maybe
had,
that's 2 in a row, that's not
Uh,
allowed.
It's possible I might not be back from my terrible Florida trip by the 8th, but we don't really have solid plans because we're driving.
If we were to move that around at all, does that help either of you? You know, by
I
a
get-
day or two?
I get back in July, I get back on the, where am I looking at the month? I think the 11th? No, 9th?
You get back on the 9th?
I get back on the 9th.
So you're not going to really get for a
We
meeting on the
we
9th.
usually have only one meeting in July anyway, right?
I know
If
this
any.
is an extraordinary year.
Right, but if it's for these, I
10th
mean,
or
I
11th would be enjoyable, probably.
I can't do the 10th.
Nope, 11th then would be enjoyable.
I can do the 11th.
Superintendent, are
I'm
you
in
off July?
DC. I'm not off all of July, but I'm in DC. I've got a governance thing I have to do.
Well, seeing as how Amy would be missing the 25th, it'd be nice.
No,
to-
I'd be there the 25th.
Oh, you would?
Yeah.
All
Oh,
right.
well, the
Just a
25th
10-9.
helps you, perfect.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, so I think at this point, with the change to the 25th,
Yeah.
July,
So
we got,
the
oh, it's
8th
a 5 Monday July. So if we did the 15th and the 29th, does that work any better for anybody? 15th and the 29th of July?
Yes.
So the 3rd and 5th?
Yes.
Yep.
My kids are enrolled in camp, so we'll be
15th
back by
works
then.
well for me.
All right.
29th, I'm not here.
Oh,
Summer, canoe time.
you'll be busy canoeing?
And let's not even discuss August, we'll just go with our regular schedule for August.
Yes.
So
Oh.
those dates
So we
would
got
be,
15th and
Damascus
what
can
else?
come.
so it's
enjoy.
June
And the
10th,
29th.
June 25th, July
Good thinking.
15th, and July 29th.
All right, so we'll worry about August later.
Yes.
Okey-dokey.
Well, we'll leave August as the 2nd and 4th
Oh.
Mondays.
Gotcha.
Of course, one of those is probably Labor Day.
Nope.
No, that's the 2nd.
Great.
Yeah.
For now, until everybody else comes up with conflicts.
Is the 10th still going to be at Mom's? We were supposed to be rotating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
June 10th.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
June
what it is.
10th at Mom's, and then we're moving the 24th. to the
But you'll
25th.
send it, Sharon will send us
I know
a,
that.
she should send us an updated one, just not,
Yeah.
to make sure that we know it's updated.
Yeah, and actually what we really, just a simple
Yeah.
email that says, these are your dates.
These are your dates rather
Yeah.
than,
Invitations.
Okay.
Dates and locations, yeah. Which I assume will be pretty much the high school after that, since there's AC in the library.
Oh. As opposed to here?
Yes.
Awesome.
What we have here.
There's our.
Peter, are we
Yes,
going to
ma'am.
do committee reports?
Uh,
Or do you want me just to send you?
Yes, we didn't cover that. That would be, if we could just get a quick update. Well, facilities we had.
Finance.
Finance, not facilities,
Yeah.
finance.
Exhausted my.
Yeah, so really, it's just
Okay,
you.
it's just us?
Yeah.
Okay. So the policy committee met and we reviewed the wellness policy that was presented last week. And we made some corrections, so we'll get that out.
Great.
Made the corrections based on some of the comments that came up last week. So we'll get that out to everybody. I don't know when you want us to vote on that or put that on the agenda for a vote.
So let's do discussion on the 10th and vote on the 25th.
Okay. Okay, and then the other policy we're looking at is students on the school board. And we have some students who are very interested in presenting to us. And I would like to see them present sometime in June.
Awesome.
So I was hoping that we're working on a draft with them and we're going to be meeting with the students in the next 2 weeks and we could get something out to you for you to look at by the 10th, but maybe put them on the school board
On the agenda for the
on
25th.
the 25th?
If you'll confirm with them that they're
Okay.
willing to come on the 25th.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
confirm with
it's
them.
hard. It can be a hard sell.
I don't know, there's some very
Pretty
interested
fired
in
up.
that.
Students were interested in
If
that.
not,
Are these students auditioning for the job or?
They are.
Talk to us about it.
No, they're
Yeah.
positioning for the policy,
Right. Not that they
not the job.
necessarily should.
But they want to
be.
present why they feel students
Okay, all right.
should be on the board.
And you don't think that that could happen on the 10th?
I don't think so because our committee, because there's some conflict in our committees that we might not be able to see them before then.
Okay.
Okay? If it looks like we could,
Yeah.
then I'll let you know.
Let's
Okay.
get them in there.
Yes, I'll send that to Sharon. Yeah, yeah.
All right, thanks very much. That wraps up our agenda. So the only other motion would be to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Everybody moves it. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all again very much.